Welcome to the Financial Planner Life podcast, and today I'm joined by Phillip Instone, who is Financial Planning Director at PGI Financial. Phil, how are you doing today? Or Phillip, sorry.
Yeah, well spotted there, Sam. Really well, thanks. Yeah, absolutely. Good weather here. So, yeah, you've got a nice view of my vertical radiator. I'm afraid there's nothing snazzy in the background, but I'm in the office, working from home.
Matt, say that whiteboard looks quite busy. What have you got going on there?
Yeah, lots going on. Gable reports, various other bits and pieces. Just the normal stuff kind of thing. I mean, there's CPD on there. There's some emails to call back on. We're redeveloping the website. I've got callbacks to do. Yeah, it's been busier, but there's enough on there to keep me working hard at the moment. So
how have you found the whole lockdown situation, COVID? Has it affected your business at all?
It has affected it in the way that, as you know, Sam, I bought another practice in February. So it's the third acquisition we've done since setting up the firm about 9 years ago. And the dynamics were kind of weird because we bought the firm in February. So we completed the legals in February, just literally as COVID was raising its head. Right. So in terms of timing, it was kind of the best time and the worst time. I think the good thing is that we managed to conclude all the face-to-face meetings, the legals, and all the technical bits and pieces before lockdown, which is great. But then equally, you're kind of taking on board a raft of new clients who are expecting to and have received a letter from me pertaining to the fact that, reassuring them, this guy, your old advisor's retired. We're going to come out with joint meetings. We're going to continue that relationship. I'm going to introduce myself. Nothing. We couldn't provide any of those face-to-face relationships. So it's been pretty tricky. We've had to do it by letter, by post. At the same time, my team of paraplanners and administrators, relatively small team. There's 3 ladies who work for me, all been in the industry for a long time. They're based in my office in Leeds. And we, with COVID, suddenly we were pretty much not able to go into the office. And so very quickly we had to find a new way of working. Luckily for us, technology has always been the backstay of what we do. And because I travel all around the country, my colleagues take the mickey because I've got clients from literally Scotland to the Isle of Wight. So everywhere in between, London, Cheshire, the Midlands, a lot on the M62 corridor, but pretty much everywhere. I go where the quality business is. That's my business model. And
have you always had clients spread out across the UK, or was that part of your strategy, or was it because you sort of brought them with you from areas you lived before? Because some people's strategy is to focus on one specific area, isn't it, and have their clients within an area within one location. But some advisors I come across have got them spread out all over the UK, and in my head that feels like a massive headache. Is it a massive headache, or?
It's. I think if you're running a business which is built organically, then to a degree you tend to operate within your locality and attract clients around that area. That can take longer. So it can take longer to get where you want to be. My goal has always been to when I started off, my end game, it's kind of the peak place in my business, seemed to be me managing a number of high net worth clients and bigger cases, bigger referrals, slightly more technical. So it uses my qualifications, and you're dealing with more assets under one family. So effectively you're building a relationship, but then it's spreading to all the different generations. And as a result, you're getting more under management, but through that one relationship. And if you manage those relationships well, even though there might be fewer of them, effectively in my opinion, that's a more consolidated and efficient process. So I bought client banks over the last 7 years.
Right.
And I bought 2 client banks and then 1 DA firm, as I mentioned earlier. And they have clients all over the country. And so it depends on where those clients are. Yes, the majority might be on the M62 corridor in one particular location, but you'll always have outliers that are in London, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, wherever it might be. But
Okay.
actually, if you buy the right quality client bank, it's worth getting on a plane and going to Glasgow once a year. It's worth getting on a plane and going down to Southampton twice a year. Because actually, we're talking a couple of £100 in plane fares and maybe a couple of £100 on hotels, but you might be managing a 1.5, 1.6 million client, as opposed to doing, spending 3 weeks seeing 12 clients in your locality. So it's kind of a false economy, I think. I think it's better for me to have fewer relationships that are more intrinsically valuable, and it's a more efficient model.
Traveling to those higher net worth clients isn't a problem. The better quality client, it doesn't matter where they're based. It's all relative and it's all value, isn't it? At the end,
it is, but there is a caveat to that. Right. COVID, going back to your first question, COVID has changed the landscape. So what happened in the past is that I've spent 8 years traveling the country, condensing my clients from hundreds of clients down to a core of about 130 households. And so we manage around 43 mil in assets, which is, for one advisor is a good level. It's a good turnover. And for me, it enables me to manage a team of administrators and paraplanners in-house, build their own portfolios, but be nimble enough to go in the directions I want to. So we haven't got the legacy of hundreds of other advisors to worry about. I'm not sat in an office just doing compliance all day. I'm actually going out and speaking to clients and so on. So that for me was part of the job, and that's the bit that I enjoy. So I wanted to continue with that. But the one thing that COVID has done is meant that whereas I felt that actually some remote relationships would, I suppose, get bigger and bigger over the next few years, and so my traveling would reduce, better for the environment, better for me personally. I'm more productive working from home or in the office. And I thought that would maybe happen over the next 5 years. The reality is COVID has brought digitalization crashing through the door. So now clients are, they're actually appreciating the fact that I'm not turning up, having spent the previous 2 nights in a hotel and then turning up at their door with potentially COVID. So they're happy about that. And they're settling into this, into this more remote relationship. But the one thing that I am struggling with a little bit is, I'm not struggling, but I think it would have a long-term negative effect, would be trying to do acquisitions where you don't have that initial face-to-face contact. Because I think there is a degree of skepticism over a remote relationship from day one. Whereas clients do buy into you, and there's a lot of stuff we can do in terms of sharing screens and sending them brochures, speaking to my staff. We do conference calls where there's more than me involved. The reality is it's really nice just to touch base every now and then. So what I'm going to do is probably over the next 12 months is make sure that I actually physically meet every single one of the 40 households that I've bought. It may or may not happen, but the offer's there. So, and I think that will help cement the relationship long term. My existing clients are happy. I've already met them many, many times over the last 10 years. So they're already entrenched and they trust me.
Here's an interesting question. How many times do you think you need to see somebody face to face to build that relationship, to be able to continue it over the internet via Zoom, for example?
I don't think it's the same with every client. I think I've got clients who have come on board now who are Zoom or telephone only and have come on board in the last 6 months. And do you know what? They trust me already. And they trust me for 2 reasons. Number one, I'm really transparent and there's regular contact. We've provided them with lots of paperwork that's adding value. It's not kind of just paperwork for paperwork's sake. And we've worked hand in hand with the other advisors. So he would do telephone calls to introduce me first, maybe a conference call, and then I then take over the relationship. And a few of the clients, they've been great. In fact, all the clients have been great in that respect. The reason I'm saying that a face-to-face would at some stage help cement the relationship is that there are some clients who, when we're talking, the management of £1 million plus or £500,000 plus, I think there is an element of face-to-face contact that just goes some way to secure that relationship. So although it hasn't been a problem and we haven't lost clients as a result, I think from my point of view, I'd just like to touch base with them physically at least once every few years. And then I think it also shows an element of intent and commitment from my point of view. I'm prepared to get off my backside and actually drive to the house or a hotel or wherever, meet them, and take some time out of my day to do that. For me, it helps. And the customer retention is better, I think.
Yeah, and I guess as well, if someone's got $1 million plus, they're likely paying a higher fee for a higher level of service. It's not like you're having to service, I don't know, 200 clients that are putting away £5,000 to £10,000 a year or something like that. I guess if you got somebody on their high net worth or ultra high net worth, I guess perhaps possibly, face to face is the right way to do it. And technology obviously bridges the gap in situations like this, and it becomes very useful. And as you've mentioned, you haven't lost clients, and in fact, it's probably helped you on your acquisition. It's interesting that you've gone through an acquisition at such a difficult time. And it's been successful. It just shows also how, like, traditionally you would have done it compared to now, and how technology has helped you facilitate that. Imagine if it was so many years back and you had a Nokia 3310, or you'd have been screwed, wouldn't you?
Well, the funny thing is, my first part of my career was working for First Direct, the telephone company. So I'm really, really comfortable doing things over the phone. And I dealt with some really high level clients then over the phone. So that bit doesn't worry me. And I think we would have probably achieved similar results over the phone, because we tend to put our paperwork in a very readable format. It's very informative, but it's not laboured. So one of the big advantages of me going directly authorised a few years ago rather than being under a network is that my suitability reports now are, instead of being 35 pages plus, they're kind of down to anywhere between 7 and 12 pages, depending on the complexity of the case. So it's and actually the review letters are 2 pages. So they're far more readable, and I think they're far more value to a client. We don't skimp in any way. The information is there. There's associated documents attached that they can read as well in terms of performance and KFIs and so on. But I think the regulator has a point where they've constantly said that what they want to see is advisors presenting information in a readable format. Whereas I think that the tendency for the networks is to almost make sure that they look at it from their own risk perspective, and they can, if they can build a report with 35 pages, it's for their benefit because it covers off many, many warnings. Whereas the reality is a client won't read it. They'll make a decision based on whether they trust you as an advisor.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas what I try and do now I've gone directly authorised is present the information in a condensed, more readable format that's useful, and they can actually read through, and they will read the report. They may get to the end of 6 or 7 pages and say, well, that's enough. We now need to have a chat to Philip, but they'll actually read it. Whereas if I give them a report of 35 pages, forget it. So I think, yes, we would have still done it over the phone. And certainly I would say 50% of the clients we've gone through the first appointment with during this acquisition period, they've just done telephone reviews, not Zoom. And it's gone really well. It's gone really well. Providing you send everything out, you talk to them, you preempt the calls with a little chat, you keep in touch with them, keep them informed, and then you go through it over the phone. So it's worked okay. We've got there, but maybe just a bit slower.
And that's the strength, isn't it, of a good financial planner, is that relationship, that trust that they can build with the client. Because all they want really at the end of the day is reassurance that what you're doing is the right thing for them, and you're protecting them, and their money's in the right place and being looked after in the right way. And especially during things like COVID or changing over from one company to another, they just want to know that the trust is there, don't they? And
they do.
I think that's the job, isn't it, of the financial planner, to build that trust and everything. And in the background, yes, you've got your model portfolios, your power planners doing your research, etc., putting together these readable, simple, psycholinguistic documents that someone can digest without being bored terribly, reading them. I think that's key as well. If someone go, oh, look, I understand it by reading just like a couple of pages, but I'll phone Philip up if I need to. And I think, that's the relationship, isn't it? And that's the strength in building your clients.
I would say so.
Philip, so with this podcast then, it's very much about understanding your career as well, and how you got into, obviously the end where you are right now is running your own financial planning practice, which is directly authorised, but I'm sure you didn't start out that way. So what I'd love to understand really is if you can just give us and our listeners a bit of an overview of how you got into financial planning and got yourself to the place you are today.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So ironically, I didn't go straight into banking because I wanted to do that. I joined the Navy when I left school. You know, my goal was I was aiming to be a language expert. I was learning Russian, Arabic, and Spanish to degree level, and that was the idea. You know, to go in the Navy and do all that. Didn't go to university. Decided that the Navy was right. Passed all the exams. Was offered a commission, and then got a medical discharge because of my eyesight. So at 19, I was suddenly on my back foot, saying, "What the hell do I do? I haven't been to university. I've got some qualifications, but they're just basic bog standard stuff. No degree." So the banking job came up, and I thought, yeah, a career in banking would. I like numbers. I like that kind of that quite technical approach, but I really, really enjoy doing the right thing for clients. So it seemed like a good way of, I suppose, helping people, but also doing something that was quite technical as well. And that really appealed to me. So I got into First Direct, got a job as I think I was in lending at the time. And started on that road. Did a few jobs with First Direct, spent about 7 years there. And then went off and became a financial advisor in 2000, working for Santander. So when I was with Santander, very salesy. They'd just come through a management buyout. I think it was Abbey at the time. And I hated it. Absolutely hated it. It was absolutely contrary to what we'd learned at First Direct. For me, it's all about service and building relationships with clients. And the financial advice approach in 2000, so 20 years ago, totally different to where we are today. It was all about sales targets. So I left. I hated it. And I swore I'd never get back into financial advice. So I went off and did other things. I did up properties and with the family and various other bits and pieces, worked for another finance company. And then in 2005, I went back into financial advice and decided that actually for me, I wasn't prepared to turn my back on everything I'd worked for. I got all my qualifications. And I recognized that there was a model out there for me, which would be an independent, technical, bespoke financial advice practice that would enable me to provide that personal service, great performance, and actually help people. So that's what I aim to do. So I got back into employment. I worked for Barclays, first of all, as a mortgage advisor, and then paid for all my own qualifications, did it on my own time, recognizing that I would need to do that to be able to then get a job as a financial advisor again, because this is 5 years after I first taken my qualifications. And then once I'd got a good sales record again with a bank, I then got the job with Halifax, became a financial advisor with Halifax, had to take all my exams again, which was a bit of a pain, but hey ho. So went through all my exams again, and then spent a few years with Halifax. And funnily enough, just as I got through kind of those initial couple of years of getting on my feet, we went into the financial crisis. So it was kind of baptism of fire, in fact, it was 12 months after I hit the ground running, so I joined the Halifax in 2007. And I remember going to a conference there, which was at the NEC, and it was full. It was not the NEC, it was the conference centre on Broad Street in Birmingham. And so if you've ever been there, the main atrium is, you could probably get about 3,000 people in this room. And it's all tiered, and it's a great big place. And they had guest speakers on from, Richard Hammond was there, and typical kind of Americanized, let's big them up, let's motivate these guys kind of conference. And I was there at the time when the financial advice sector was generating the biggest amount of profit to the Lloyds Group. And we were on a high, as an industry, we were on a high. We were making huge amounts of money. Investments were at an all-time high, back end of 2007. And then literally within a month or two, it all hit the fan. And we were then looking at Bradford and Bingley going bust, Lehman Brothers going bust, the financial crisis, the market crashed, and the rest, of course, is history. So at the end of the financial crisis, and having got through all these years of pretty much clients turning their back on financial services through mistrust of the banks, I got a bit sick of it, to be honest. I got a bit sick of being told by managers to sell products to clients who were concerned they were about to lose everything they had. I was more about reassuring them during a bad period and then retaining that relationship for when things got better. The bank was all about, let's sell things because actually we need to get our balance book up. And there was a complete contrast. There was a complete conflict of interest. To me, sales and advice really don't go together. You need to maintain momentum, but that momentum should be based on an underpin of good service and relationship building, which is what you referred to earlier. So I left 2011. I picked myself up and left. And at the time, you know, I was off with stress. I had sales targets coming out my ears, and I just said, look, enough is enough. You know, you guys are going one direction, and I'm absolutely against that. So I left, went on my own, went independent, joined Honister. Fantastic. I had 6 months of really good training with them. They were an independent network, so the restricted model wasn't around at the time. They were just independent. They had about 1,200 advisors, but they were very, very top heavy in terms of compliance, management. Technology wasn't what it is now, so they had lots of staff all over the country, and we were we were a year ahead of RDR, and unfortunately, they just did not adapt to RDR the way they should have done. And they also were carrying a legacy of bad advice. So when their PI insurance came up for renewal at June 2012, they couldn't get the renewal, and as a result, they went into administration. So I'd only been going a year at this point. So suddenly I was deauthorised. I can't remember how much it was, maybe around £40,000 that was owed to me in commissions and fees. That suddenly vanished. I had to put my, you know, I don't mind saying financially, you know, at that point, that was my tax bill. That was paying for my mortgage for the next few months. That was going to get me over Christmas. All went. So I had to put my mortgage on the back foot. I had to speak to the tax office. I had to speak to the FCA and say, look, guys, you know, I've gone in this for the long term. I'm qualified and professional, got a great client bank. But, you know, financially right now, they've gone into administration. I'm not reauthorized yet. It took me 6 months to get reauthorized. So my client stood by me and so on, but it was really painful.
I bet.
And then after that point, I got reauthorized with another network, and that was True Potential. The reason I went with TP was their technology is fantastic. Really, really good. And the support they gave me during that period, spot on. And I was a registered individual, which is basically you're at the time I was an independent, as I am now. I was independent, but under their network. So I used their business cards. They pay for PI insurance and regulatory stuff, and they take some of the heavy lifting off if you're just a single advisor. So in the early days, they were great, and they gave me access to their platform and so on. But as things progressed, I recognized that actually a lot of my clients, you know, I've always self-built my portfolios, so I didn't like the restrictive way it worked. And after a number of years, they decided to go down the restricted route. I wanted to stay independent. So in 2007, I went DA and decided to trade under my own brand. And that was, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back. It's been great. We've now got, you know, over the last 8 years, I've gradually developed my team. I've taken on more staff, and we've got to a point now where we've got 3, you know, really experienced ladies. 2 of them have been in the industry for 25 years each. So I've been in about 27 years. They've been in 25 years each. So between the 3 of us, we've got, you know, in excess of 70 or 80 years experience. And then we've just taken on another lady as another administrator. So yeah, we're now nicely positioned, but it's been quite a long and rocky road, as you can appreciate.
Okay, no, thank you so much for that overview. Very, very good.
Sam, just one thing. With me saying it's been a rocky road, the one thing I would say is that it's been up and down, but all of those experiences, whether they're good or bad or indifferent, every single one has got me where I am today. And the one thing I would say is that by almost kind of breaking early on, you know, almost seeing the structure around me collapse and then the network go into administration, what it's done, it's made me really, really resourcul and flexible, and also look forward as well. So I'm always looking at contingencies. I'm always looking at having a plan B in place. I think that's one of the key things about being an advisor. You've got to make sure that you're flexible, you're forward thinking, you're resourceful, because things can change. The industry can change, the network can change that you're associated with, technology changes, your client needs will change. It's a constant. The one thing that never changes is the incredible rate of change in this industry. And you've got to be comfortable with that, I think.
What do you think is the biggest change that's happened to financial planning over, say, the last year?
Over the last 12 months, I would say, I think it's the way we deliver our services. I think for me, when you asked me the COVID question, one of the big things in the short term was that we had to take the guys who were in the office and we had to then make them home-based. So luckily, I've already got my paraplanner's remote anyway. So when I say remote, she generally spends a day in the office and a couple of days at home. She used to do 20 hours a week. She now does 25 hours. So pretty much I've already set up an office suite in her house. I've already got an office suite in my house. All we needed to do is get my key secretary or PA to take the computer equipment and the server and the printer, stick it in her house for 3 months, and we were ready to go. So pretty much we were at full chat for the whole of COVID. We didn't really miss a beat. We were one man down, so the other two people, because she was on furlough, unfortunately she joined us on the 2nd of March, so she wasn't covered by the government scheme. But she was too early in the relationship, in the training, to be able to give her any work, so she was just at home. The other two picked it up. They were doing overtime. And so it's a bit of a financial strain in that short-term period of 3 months. I was having to keep one person on full-time, but actually she wasn't adding any value, and the other two were having to get overtime. Our turnover dropped slightly, but the reality is that our investment structure, which is very much forward-thinking, has seen gains this year, which has been fantastic considering the market's almost 20% down. So we've got through, I think, the worst of it so far. The big thing on the horizon is going to be obviously the short-term problems around COVID and Trump over the next 6 to 12 months. But no, in that respect, over the last 12 months, I think it's just the way we deliver our services. It's been more remote and more, it's been more efficient. And actually, one thing I would say is it's given me more time to spend in the office, speaking to fund managers, analysing the investments. And actually, that's where the investment growth has come from. I'm more productive as a result. I'm not spending 3 hours a day on the motorway. And that's got to be better for clients.
And that's what I'm hearing the most, is this time wasted previously in cars or, Definitely. In meetings, just pointless meetings, and in being car traveling to and from clients. And it's such a huge waste of time. And I think everybody's seeing that post-COVID. They're seeing
I wouldn't agree that the meetings were pointless, because I'm still doing 1 hour, 2 hour appointments. So the meetings themselves are still the same length. And actually the face-to-face meetings probably did more to cement that relationship with new clients earlier. But the travel time, absolutely, you're 100% correct.
I think the pointless meeting, when I mention pointless meetings, not pointless meetings with clients, but pointless meetings with other people, things that would divert your attention, And the difference, I think, the beautiful thing about...
The only thing I would say though, Sam, in response to that is, are you referring to maybe things like CPD?
No, I'm thinking more about myself here. I'm thinking more about people wasting time in my business. I'm not even thinking about it.
Come on now. You're only marginally pointless. You're a journalist. I mean, come on now. No, I'm only joking. So the reality is, you've hit very, very much on an area that I think is probably unrecognised during this period, but I think we can all relate to it. CPD is a big part of what we do. So we have to do these CPD events. And I think the one disadvantage with being home-based is that there is that lack of physical and verbal stimulation. You're not meeting people. There's no social side to this kind of thing. I mean, obviously, we're having a chuckle now, but actually we can't kind of grab a beer afterwards or grab a meal together. And, there isn't any of that. No. Whereas the CPD event did bring that to the table. And I think the one thing for me is that whilst we all used to moan about having to spend, 2 hours traveling to a CPD event that actually only yielded an hour's worth of CPD or 1.5 hours, and then an hour and a half to get back again. So we spent 6 hours of our day. We've only got an hour and a half CPD. The reality is that the benefit it brings is that it's quite stimulating when you're there. So some of these events are pretty good. I used to go to some of the ETF.com ran an event, which was very, very informative. I used to go to the events by professional advisors, by portfolio manager. They were very good as well. We used to get to meet the fund managers, drill them down, and so on and so forth. You'd be sat at lunch with a fund manager on your left from Jupiter, a guy from Bruin on the right, and you'd just be chewing the cud and comparing strategies. And it's those kind of little times that add the value that you can't really relate to now. And the one thing that it's doing, it's turning me off CPD, because the thought of having to spend yet another 2 hours in front of a sodding computer kind of makes me feel quite uneasy. You know, I lose the will to live. You know, it's not as stimulating as moving around a location. You know, you're in a hotel, you've got different, bounce off rooms where you can kind of break out sessions. There's a bit of lunch. You're kind of doing stuff over a day and you're interested. Whereas now it's all on the computer. It's really quite grueling. And I think you get Zoom blindness, if that makes sense. You know, it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. I think that's the danger with this kind of remote world. So
you can't do it all. Yeah, you can't do it all the time. You need to break it up, and fingers crossed we'll go back to some form of new normality in the future, because but I think we'll pick our time. We'll say, like, well, there's no point in me traveling all that way. How about if I pick up let's jump on a Zoom meeting first and have a conversation instead of a first meeting face to face, because in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I've got to go and see this guy face to face because that's what I've been taught to do. And that's what builds relationships. Whereas actually jumping on a Zoom meeting for 15 minutes, you might have an amazing conversation. That guy saves time, you save time, and you can crack on with the work. So I think from a prospecting perspective and a client generation perspective, I think it helps in the early stages of building the relationships as you've experienced. And I think it will certainly sort of aid in any kind of new advisors wanting to generate clients, and build relationships quicker. On that note, you're obviously a directly authorized business here, and you've made it very sort of clear as well that you've grown through acquisition. So I've had nobody on the podcast actually that I'm aware of anyway, that has grown through acquisition. I've never asked any of those questions. So I previously set up Gunner & Co., which was an IFA acquisition business. So I've got a bit of an experience around talking to, vendors and clients that are looking to sell and buy. So I'd love to hear your experience. And I think it would be very valuable to other financial planners who are thinking about growing and have thought about acquisition, but it's quite overwhelming. So love to hear your experience. So first off, around acquisitions, how do you go about finding somebody who's looking to sell their business?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, I'm just going to kind of respond to the one question that came up, or the one point that came up in my mind, which is, why would you want to acquire? Why is there a need? Because that's probably, if somebody's new to the industry, they're getting some experience, they've got a choice. They either join an existing firm and maybe deal with leads coming in from there, or they decide that they're stepping off with maybe a few clients or family and friends that they can confidently manage, and they think they've got enough behind them to organically grow. They're going to fund the first 12 months and maybe organically grow. The reality is that that's certainly one option. Organic growth or joining another practice, that's certainly one option. And there's a lot of firms out there right now with the lack of, they don't have a retirement plan. So, they may think, okay, well, we're really busy right now, we're buoyant, we could do with some staff on board, and maybe one day, they might buy the business off me. So that's one option. But the one reason that I decided to acquire was I was working alongside some other advisors and actually could see the benefit of acquiring. And the reason I say that is because if you're growing organically, you've got a website, people ring you up and say, hi, got a pension, I'd really like some advice, I've got a question. What you're trying to do is, there's a number of different obstacles to go over. First of all, they've probably never dealt with a financial advisor before, because if they had, they probably would ring them first. So they may be quite suspicious of the industry. They've probably done some work on the internet, so they're probably aware that there will be fees, and they tend to shop around as well. They're quite fee savvy. The impression on the internet is, don't get ripped off. Let's drill down on the fees, find someone that's good, but actually, you want to be looking at getting the fees down as low as possible as well. Don't go active, go passive because it's cheaper. All this kind of stuff. It's very much driven by, no disrespect to journalists, but it's very much driven by what will sell newspapers or sell press. And it's kind of the current theme is all about saving money. The reality is that that's not the place where where everybody is. Some people, yes, they buy on price. A lot of people buy on quality. A lot of people buy on relationships, and it depends on the solution as well at the other end. Some people buy on in terms of qualifications. Are you chartered? Are you independent? So on. So there's a lot of barriers to get over before you even get to the point where they'll agree to a first appointment. Then when you go to the first appointment, it's very likely that you're going to have to put a recommendation together before they'll get to the point of actually committing to making a decision over whether they want to use you. And what you then have the danger of is you either say, okay, well, I want to charge you a fee before I put together this recommendation, in which case they can say, well, forget it. Or you say, okay, well, I'll take a punt and put it all together in my time and then present it on the basis that I'm pretty sure they're going to become a client. And then they say, thanks very much, but actually leave it with me. And then they never become a client anyway. So what I decided to do was buy client banks, because what that gave me, having worked in the bank and tried to convert clients who were cash-based into investments and know how difficult that can be, what I wanted to do was deal with clients who had a reason to see you. And what I found that by buying a client bank that was maybe neglected, whether it's active clients or neglected clients or a combination of the two, what it meant was that you're buying clients who have an existing relationship with the financial advice industry. So they're not inherently suspicious. They've seen the benefits in the past. They have investments. And so there's a reason for you to go around and see them. And all you're doing in those early stages is really just establishing a relationship. Let's get some trust going. Let's get some dialogue. But it's much easier to arrange that kind of initial meeting without risk to you as an advisor than if you were just going in and trying to pitch to the family from scratch. So for me, it was a much more efficient use of my time and resources, and that's why I went down the acquisition route. Now, in answer to your question about how would you acquire, you would, if you're going into the industry from scratch, and funnily enough, I was speaking to my business account manager for my bank yesterday. He's qualifying at the moment to be level 4, and he's going through his RO1s, and he basically asked me the same question. And we had a very similar conversation that I'm having with you now, with him yesterday. And what I said to him was that one of the best ways for an advisor to get on, in my opinion, is either through a network. So someone like, if they're happy to be, so in my opinion, people who go down the restricted route tend to be people who want to maybe not have the regulatory burdens that you would have if you went down the DA independent route. That's one of the big attractions. And if I ever went down the restricted route, that would be the only reason really. Because it does make it far more, it's a far more inclusive environment. The problem for me is that I hold on to my independence quite dearly. It means something to me, and to be able to say to a client, my only loyalty is to you, not to any other company out there, I found it a real strength, a real asset in my career. But in answer to your question, if I was coming in and I've got my qualifications, you've really got a couple of routes. If you want to be independent, my suggestion would be go down and get yourself in with a firm that wants to mentor somebody. So they've probably got leads of their own, or they'll give you a small client bank. And there's plenty of firms out there at the moment who are looking for level 4 qualified people who maybe don't have a great deal of experience, but they want to take on, mold into their own kind of way of working. They'll give you support, administration support, but you're independent. You're learning really at the best place. Probably a DA firm. They've got their own procedures. They build their own portfolios, and you're really learning. You're learning, in my opinion, the best way from day one. The other way is to go down the restricted route, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just means it's a different approach. And I would say it's a little bit more salesy, only because from my own experience, the restricted networks tend to have business thresholds that they would expect you to meet. And that's, I'm not particularly aiming that in any direction, because there's a number of different restricted, big restricted networks out there, like Quilter, SJP, and True Potential. But pretty much they tend to expect you to put through certain amounts of business a year. That's just from my experience. Things may have changed, but that's generally my experience. And I didn't feel comfortable with that route. So I tended to go down the independent route. But if you go down the restricted routes, what they have, and this may be attractive to people, is that they then give you the chance of using their model and then effectively buying practices off retiring IFA or retiring restricted advisors within the network. So there's this continuation of relationship and business, and they're very canny in that they recognized a long time ago, and SJP were one of the first people to do that. They recognize that if they want to retain assets on their platform, they really need to get these new advisors in to be able to keep the assets on the platform. But as guys retire, they stay with the business, and we just get new blood coming in. So SJP have been great in that they've got academies, and Quilters are now going down the same road. They've got their own academy. True Potential are looking into kind of I believe a similar structure. They're certainly bringing on some of the new blood, and I think that's where the restricted guys really do well. They give some of the younger, maybe less experienced advisors a kind of a guaranteed route of success. As I say, it's just whether or not you're comfortable going down the restricted route or whether you want to go down the independent route. The independent route tends to be a bit more, I think personally, tends to be a bit more technical and a bit more, it gives you a bit more freedom to kind of build your own portfolios. And for me anyway, it made sure that I was the master of my own ship really for long term.
Okay.
The other route, sorry, as you get established and if you have the financing, the other route to go down is go to a broker. So like Gunnar & Co, you're saying that you're part of. I went to Retiring IFA, which is a big network, a big broker, as you know, and I bought my most recent acquisition from them or through them. And that was a guy who was also DA, an independent. He was retiring. He got in touch with them. He put his practice on the books. I got in touch with them and decided to buy through them.
Okay. So let's look at the actual timescales of acquisitions then, because they can take quite a long time for them to complete. So how long from sort of start to finish does it take for you to acquire, say, a retiring client bank or actually acquire a directly authorised firm, for example?
Okay, so my first two acquisitions were client banks from an advisor that was working with me in Honister. So we knew each other from the old network. A couple of years later, post RDR, he had far too many clients. And so the legacy was, he wasn't meeting them, he wasn't seeing them, they were neglected effectively. And so, although there were a few active clients in there, the majority needed help. And so I bought a total of 297 households from him over in two tranches, and in two acquisitions. And effectively, over the following 5 years, I've condensed that down to a client bank of about 100 households. In fact, less than that, about 80 households. So that's really condensing it down. But the acquisition period in that respect was maybe somewhere between, I would say 6 months, around 6 months, because you kind of identify at the beginning that you want to do it. You then get into conversations. He then has to provide sufficient data for me to then make a decision. We then come to an agreement over cost. We then have to draw up a contract. It goes backwards and forwards between us. He had a draft contract anyway. We didn't involve solicitors. We knew each other. We trusted each other. And so from our point of view, that kind of made sense. And that was a fairly slick process. But then you move forward into the next stage, which is me buying a DA firm, lock, stock and barrel. So I bought all the company shares and bought the company. They didn't have, he didn't have an active office. He did have one, but he closed it down. Didn't have any staff, didn't have any debts or anything like that. So it was just a case of buying the firm, the brand, taking on board the clients. From meeting him, we met in June of last year and we completed the legals. We were told by a retiring IFA it would take 3 months. The reality was that we didn't complete until February the following year. So it took us about 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, that's the thing. It can take some time, can't it, to acquire a business. You mentioned there about looking over some of the some of the data and some of the files about that business to, I assume, do your due diligence as to whether or not it's worthwhile buying. So, as a small business, were you conducting that due diligence yourself, or did you get support outside of it? Did retiring IFA help you with that? Because doing due diligence on somebody else's business is quite a risky thing, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. The data that was provided to me is always subject to the person who's providing it. And the problem is that they may use different systems, IT systems, to the ones that you use. So we tend to use Excel spreadsheets. We tend to use formulas. Probably like most people, we use a client management system which is provided by True Potential, and we buy that in as a DA firm. But their software is very good, and that enables us to provide a lot of information on the clients and the business we run, which is great. The problem is that when you're buying a business, you're then subject to what systems they use. So you ask for the information, but if they use a different client management system, and certainly the gentleman did, then it can be quite difficult to get the information you need. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You can get a degree of information, and I did, and certainly retiring IFA in the early stages, they give you kind of a summary. So they gather some information, they give you a summary, and that's fine. It gives you an idea of whether the financials will work. But then the next stage is the in-depth due diligence. So that's when you start drilling down. So we get the guy to come over and spend a day with us so that he gets an idea of whether our business is a good fit for his clients. And also we then spend time with him. So we get to an idea of whether his clients are going to be a good fit for our business and whether there's any legacy bad advice, for example. That's what you're really looking for. And our retiring IFA put me in touch with an audit, a compliance consultant, and we got them out to, and she was great, and we got her out to the practice. She spent a day, cost me, I can't remember how much it was now, but let's say 750 quid, and she spent a day just going through everything. And she came back to me with, the data's not in the same format that we would expect, maybe the way that we work, but actually the reality is that everything is in place. There's no bad advice, and it's good to go. That was my gut feeling from day one. And the funny thing is, when I met the guy in June last year, I then spent about 3 months then going off and looking at other options before we started the legal process. And I travel all over the country looking for people. The reality is that my gut reaction that I had at the time, which is, I can deal with this guy. He's got a good sense of humor. He is ethical. His values are the same as mine. Yes, he's retiring. Yes, he doesn't have a team behind him. Yes, there's holes his investment process is different to mine, but actually they're all good things because it means we can bring value to the table. So yes, the actual logistics were quite challenging, but the reality is it's been absolutely the right thing to do.
Throughout my career, I've spoken to many financial advisors who actually really struggled to acquire. They found it difficult to either find somebody that's looking to sell their client book or build a strong enough relationship with that person that I guess that the person who's selling the business could trust that advisor would actually look after their clients. And a big thing, whenever I approached somebody who was thinking about selling their business, one of the major concerns was actually sometimes, and I used to kind of gauge how ethical the person would be actually. It was usually in the beginning, it was like, well, these are my friends, some of these clients. I need to make sure that who I'm selling it to, this client book, are going to look after my clients. And that used to come before how much money am I going to make,
Absolutely.
Do you think some advisors struggle to acquire because they aren't building what advice would you give to an advisor who is thinking of acquiring clients from a retiring IFA? What advice would you give them? How best to approach the person selling their client?
Yeah, I think the reality is that number one, make sure that you are confident in your own business. So make sure that you are on top of your own data. There's no good going into somebody else's business because you've got to bear in mind, it's not a case of you just saying, well, I'm in control because I'm buying. That's not the way to look at it. What you're actually doing is you're going into someone's office, home, wherever it might be, and you're saying to them, everything you've worked for over the last 20 years, I'm about to buy off you, but I'm giving, because it's quite an emotional process selling a business as an IFA, because you've seen the clients, you've seen their families, you've seen births and deaths, you've been to their funerals, you've been to the weddings. It's a very, very emotional process. So you want to trust the guy who's coming in to speak to you or the lady who's coming in to speak to you. So you have to make sure that you are A, transparent, you are B, on top of your data, so you can confidently in a conversation say, we've been going for 10 years, we manage around 43 million, we build our own portfolios, we're independent. You kind of need to know the USP for your business. And then you also need to get across your values, because whilst you can't really get that across in kind of an IFA email, you know, it's all about data and, you know, the kind of the logistical finances. Is it a good deal? Is it not? That's nothing to do with values. But the person who's selling is really only going to trust you when they know where your values come from. So I think it's really important that while you're going in there to actually buy their business, you're also going in there to sell yourself and sell your business process. How will you care for those clients? Have you got the staff in place to be able to take on board? The other thing as well is you need to make sure, and this is one thing that the gentleman who I bought off said that gave him confidence in what we do, was the fact that we've done it before, which I know would be difficult for someone doing it the first time, but he recognized that I had an understanding of the process. So that was important for him, because it meant that actually when he came over to see me and my 3 staff, we were all already in the back of our mind, we've already got a process in place. So I thought, okay, number 1, after the acquisition, we're going to write to everybody with a joint letter, tell them what's happening, and preempt the next stage, which is introductory phone calls. And we're going to gradually kind of slowly move the clients into and migrate through a migration period. So they're never feeling isolated. They're never feeling orphaned. They're kind of almost thinking that they're appreciating the time that we've both spent on this, that it's got to work from both points of view. And it's really important that the existing advisor gets across that they trust me as the new advisor because he's spent so much time looking at my business as much as I've spent time looking at his business. So it's a two-way street. Regular communication, you know, it's all about trust. Don't go in there with like a bull in a china shop. Get that relationship, and then you can start to do changes and things to make things more efficient if you need to. But that's the one thing I would say. You know, as a new advisor buying a client bank from day one, even if they haven't done it before, they need to get across to the advisor who's selling the fact that they've got the resources in place and the structure and an understanding of what's going to be needed to be able to let that advisor who's retiring go into a retirement confidently. They don't want problems. That guy's going to sell, and then he's going to want to then effectively do a few meetings, and then he wants to get his money and disappear into the sunset without getting calls every 2 minutes saying this new advisor's rubbish.
What about things like liability? Let's say, for example, the advisor the person you're buying from, the vendor, yeah. So the person you're buying from, let's say they've given some dodgy advice in the past. When they sell that business to you, do you take on the legacy complaints or dodgy advice, or how does that work? Who's then responsible? He goes off into the sunset with a load of money and you're left with a load of complaints. Is that how it works?
100%. Yeah, you buy the liabilities of the firm. So effectively, any advice that's so you need to be aware of what kind of legacy business they've done. A big part of that now is DB schemes. So if you're buying a business and it has DB scheme legacy business advice, you want to know has there been any. Well, you need to know when it is and so on and so forth. Couple of things to bear in mind: if there have been legacy DB scheme advice situations, it'll massively increase the size of any PI insurance in that company. The second thing to bear in mind is, are you actually going to keep that brand going long term? So you might want to keep that brand going in the short term so that you can contact the clients, you've got data protection permissions to be able to do that, and you've still got that income coming in. But effectively what I did was I recognized early on that because there were legacy DB liabilities, the PI insurance would increase massively at the end of this year, or at the end of the business year. So I decided that there was no point in running 2 brands. I've already got a well-established IFA firm, and I wanted to bring those clients under my umbrella. I didn't want to run 2 firms because you've got 2 sets of fees and so on. So what I did was I gradually moved those clients across into the new firm, and we then, after about 6 months, we closed the old brand down. And that's done 2 things. Number one, it's meant that, and we've written to our clients and so on as a result, but I mean, it's all been, regular communication with the FCA, with the clients. Everyone was aware of what's happening. And I think because of COVID, we also tried to get across the fact that logistically, we just can't keep 2 offices going. It just doesn't make sense. And the clients are fine. They understand that. The fact that they've still got advice is the main thing. And we're regularly communicating. There's a reason to do it. But the reality is that those legacy liabilities would have cost me a fortune going forwards. And it doesn't make sense to keep those two brands open. So we shut it down. And now those legacies are gone. So I don't have the legacy of bad advice. Not that there was any, because there wasn't any bad advice. But I don't have the legacy or the potential problem of advice issues raising their head in the future.
Is that because it was linked to the old firm and not to your firm?
Yes.
Okay. But the clients are still that you've still got the clients though that have had that advice though, even though they're under your firm. Surely there's
So what happens is that the advice is on the books under the old firm.
Right.
If the client decides that actually 10 years ago, the previous advisor did a DB scheme, and that DB scheme advice he now wants to question. So at the time of purchase, there weren't any complaints, and he hadn't ever had any complaints. That's why I did it. Now we've closed the firm. If one of those clients decided to complain, that firm is no longer in place. So he would have to go to the FSCS. Sorry, he would have to go to through the Ombudsman and so on, because that firm is no longer in place. The reality is that client is now under a transfer of servicing and being serviced by my firm, which is PGI Financial. And so that firm is now responsible for advice under our banner, but we're not responsible for the advice that was given by the previous advisor 10 years ago.
Okay. I gotcha.
So in a sense, it's a consolidation process, but there is no point in keeping open lots of legacy brands if it's just bringing additional cost and liability to the new firm. The reality is that we have a much more efficient process under the new firm. And if the clients are wanting to take advantage of that process and move to the new firm, then we're quite happy for them to do that. And then at that point, as I say, we were able to then shut the old brand down.
When you are looking to acquire a business and a vendor is presented to you by the broker, is it similar to buying a house or applying for a job and having competitors also trying to buy that business? Is it a bit of a beauty parade? Are you going up against other people looking to acquire?
Yeah, it's all of that. Yeah, so you're basically going out. I went all over the country meeting people that were presented to me by a number of brokers. I probably met 6 different potential candidates. And out of those 6, some of them, because you've got to imagine the key factors in choosing, from a buyer's perspective, in choosing an ideal client bank. One might be location. Are you prepared to take clients on all over the country, or do you prefer it in one location? The second thing is assets under management. Do you want to take on lots and lots of small clients, or do you want to take on a few large clients? Now, ideally, we all want the few large clients, but the reality is the danger with buying a client bank where you've only got a few large clients is that if one of those or 2 of those don't come across, that can be a significant detriment to the deal. So whereas if 1 or 2 of the smaller clients don't come across, it's not having anywhere near the impact. So these are all the kind of factors. The other thing, of course, is age. You really don't want to be taking on a client bank where the majority of people are over 80, because what's the point? You're buying it, say 3 or 4 times trail, so you're going to need to have at least 3 or 4 years to be able to glean back the money you've invested. And so, is it likely if the clients are already over 80? So there's a number of factors. And then the final thing, of course, is whether or not there's potential for new business. So are all the clients active and pretty much at the maximum? Have they already retired and they're already at the maximum investment potential now? Because actually that's not great. Because if they're all kind of 65 to 75, in my opinion, they've already probably gone through retirement, made the investment decisions, and now they're in decumulation. So you can't really bring a lot of new value to the table in terms of new business. Whereas you get somebody who's in their 40s or 50s considering retirement, there's a lot of additional work that you can do. And then there's potentially there's that retirement period, which is another potential great new business attraction. So I think there's a number of different dynamics, and they'll all depend. The priority of those dynamics will depend on where you are in terms of your career, your finances, and what you want to achieve, what your business model looks like long term. The final thing is finances, and that really can vary depending on the deal. Retiring IFA gave me the impression that most deals now are done over a one or 2 year period. Some of the other brokers said it was over a 2 or 3 year period. Some are looking for 50% upfront and 50% after the first year. Others are looking for 50% upfront, then maybe 25%, then 25%. The trail multiple will increase the longer the period. So if you're looking at something over a very short period, chances are you're giving that retiring IFA the chance of stepping off very quickly, and therefore generally you want better terms. So you'll probably give, somewhere around 3.2 times trail. But if they're wanting to do a deal over 3 years, then because they have to wait for their money, then potentially they want more money out of you. So they want 4 or maybe a little bit more, 4 times trail. So it swings and roundabouts. Depends on your finances and what's in the background.
I think the finances side is something that can put same with anything, isn't it? When you're buying anything, you worry about the costs involved. People think, well, I'll go out and there's loads of retiring IFAs. I'm just going to go acquire a load of client banks and build my business that way. I think it would be great to understand from you, what were the costs involved in acquiring a business or a retiring IFA's client bank? Could you list or give us an idea of what those costs actually are?
I don't want to be too specific because obviously the guy's just retired, and I think it'd be wrong for me to be too specific. But the reality is right now that the market works on a basis of trail, so multiples of trail. So if I was going to retire tomorrow, then I would, and certainly when I was looking to buy the business from the other chap and also the client banks, the reality is that within the marketplace, I think we kind of accept that anywhere between 3 and 4 times trail is pretty much where you're going to sit, and that can vary depending on the terms. So as I say, a shorter period would be a lower trail multiple, but a longer period of agreement would probably be a higher trail multiple. So I paid more towards the top end of that trail spectrum, 3 to 4%, 3 to 4 times on the client banks, and then on the actual business purchase. Although I paid more on the fee-based stuff, then there was some commission-based stuff that was in the background that kind of offset it. So, there's a lot more to it than just the specific multiple. It's also, there's a lot more in addition to that. So things like the structure of the trail coming in, is it fee-based? Is it commission-based? Is it post-RDR, and so on and so forth? Are the clients active? Are they semi-active, and so on?
And what about things like the additional costs that might come up? You mentioned about bringing in somebody to do some compliance work for you to look over the book. You obviously are buying the client bank through a broker. Is there a cost involved in that? So
There is.
Can you give us an idea of what an overview of the additional costs that might well come?
Yeah, I mean, retiring IFA charged me, so let's say the deal, so percentage-wise, I can't quite remember, but I can work it out for you just to give me a rough idea. They, so that would be, so I can't remember whether they charged me 5%. I'm pretty sure they did as an initial fee.
5% of the sale value.
Yeah. And that's a chunk of money. That's a chunk of money. That is a chunk. Yeah. So there's that.
And when do they expect that? So just to give the idea, somebody who's thinking about acquiring, when are you expected to pay?
So just to give you a timescale, roughly, we start the process. There's no cost. I think there's a small fee up front. But then effectively, and this is the same with most brokers, maybe a small fee. They'll start to introduce you with people, and you'll sign an agreement to say that if they introduce you to somebody and you end up buying their business, then you agree to the big fee. And that's usually payable on completion. So that's at the end of the legals and when we did it, which was in February of this year. In addition to that, you've got things like the FCA fee. So the change in authorization from the old person onto me. So to put me on as the new director of the new firm. This is if you're going to do a full share purchase. The reason people want to do a full share purchase, or they want to do that as an exiting IFA, is because they can benefit from entrepreneurial relief. So if I buy their firm, they're taxed at a very much lower rate. Whereas with a client bank, you're still subject to all the other, the taxation. So we went down that road. He wanted to go down the road to get the benefit of the entrepreneurial relief. We went through the negotiations. I did the compliance lady, which was, let's say, £1,000. We also did the FCA fee for the application for me to be the controlling person and change that around. And that was, I think, somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500. So there's, a couple of thousand in, maybe 2,500 in professional fees. Then on top of that, there was my lawyer. And again, that might have been, say, 2,000 or 3,000. So we're already up to, we're up to about 5.5. And then on top of that, there's then the 5% of the deal, which was a fair chunk. So what I'm trying to say is that, your deal itself is just the start. You have to make sure that when you're thinking about the funding, whether it's your bank, family, remortgage, whatever it might be, or in some cases, the business that you're buying off might say, well, I want to continue trading. We'll let you buy the business or buy this client bank, and actually we'll do it over 2 or 3 years or 4 years, whatever. I've actually sold a client bank as well over the last 3 years.
Okay.
So, I sold a client bank of some of the smaller clients that I'd kept on board and actually had a good relationship with for the last 10 years. It got to the point where I realized that, for me to achieve my goal of condensing and getting more efficient with the larger clients, some of the smaller ones I just didn't have time for. I don't mean that I couldn't be bothered. It's just that there's only so many hours in the day. And I think the reality is you've just got to consider that, if you're going to stay as one advisor and you're going to have all this support, with me being a DA firm, there's all this other stuff that you can see, Gabriel reports and, investment management and so on. So you've got to be mindful of that and give yourself time to think creatively and work on the other business responsibilities.
So with those clients, there's smaller clients that didn't quite fit the model for you as a sole financial advisor to be able to sort of maintain and service to the level that you would like to, and to obviously grow your business the way you want to do it. Did you think about hiring another financial advisor? Yeah. Or are you, are you a one-man band, if you like?
Yeah. Absolutely. I did think about hiring another advisor, but for me, I think the reality is that I understand that for me to develop other advisors and get them on board, it would mean to a degree me sat in the office doing compliance checking letters. And really, it would mean becoming much more of an office-based manager than a financial advisor. And I get a lot of pleasure from developing people's finances, taking care of them as they get more vulnerable through their lives, and dealing with different aspects of their family, and building that relationship with other generations and referrals and so on. That really keeps me fresh and keeps me going. I think if I was to change my model, and I've certainly had the option of doing that, and it's not something I wouldn't do, but it's not something I've done up to now, but I would certainly then need to be more of a manager. And my goal would then be on developing the people under me. So it would be looking on, new entrants into the industry as colleagues, and then they would maybe look to buy bits of my business later. And so I'd be looking to maybe mentor them in the early stages. And I have considered doing that because I do think we need people in the industry. It's just the time. At the moment, I have enough time on my hands, only just enough to do this and deal with my clients. Yeah. So I would need to get people on board who, to a degree, could do the job. What I'm trying to say is they couldn't be a drain on the business yet because I haven't got spare time to do that.
No, okay, and I totally understand that, and that's the drive, and that's the direction you're going as a business, isn't it? Your model isn't to grow with loads of financial advisors underneath you, and as you rightfully pointed out, running a directly authorised firm and hiring financial planners adds a whole new level, not only to managing people, which takes up your time, but also into compliance responsibilities. And I
think that's the big thing. The compliance side, if I took on 2 or 3 advisors, would be massive. I'm at a point now where we've got enough capital in the business and we've got enough momentum. And I've got a really good investment proposition, and I've got a really good team, where we could take on 1, 2, 3 advisors nationally and just say, look, guys, we've got the investment structure, we've got the support, we've got the desire, and we've got the brand. Let's support you and let's train you and let's get you out there, extending PGI Financial and so on. I think one of my concerns is that you kind of spend time building them up and getting them to a point. And my big concern would be then that they could then leave the firm, take clients with them, and effectively leave me with a loss in terms of the time I've spent developing that person over the last 3, 4, 5 years, but then an additional loss in terms of losing assets where they're taking clients on that I've trusted them with. And so there's, I've seen it happen before and it can break businesses. So from my point of view, I think the best model that I've come across is one where basically where I am now, which is where I control my own destiny. I have my own brand, a direct relationship with the FCA, some great procedures, really good team that I've developed, but also autonomy over where we want to go in the business in terms of client bank and so on. But the key thing is I enjoy what I do. So I get out of bed every morning. I want to speak to my clients. I can develop my staff, which is a big, big thing for me. And, they gradually becoming more and more technical and more adept at what they do. And that's great. It's a better service to the clients, but it also means I'm not being drained from a compliance point of view. I'm still focusing on the bit that I love. And then I liaise with other advisors who are DA, and we share ideas going forward, and we bounce off each other, and we have conversations regularly, and we talk about our investment structures and so on. And that for me is everything, because I'm autonomous, but I'm within a community. That's great.
And that's really interesting. So I've been speaking to more financial advisors, especially financial advisors that run their own practices. A bit like me, really. I'm part of a recruiter network of, company owners who all come together and share their ideas and the things that work well. It's brilliant during COVID because obviously everyone was losing the plot. And this network helped us absolutely massively understand how to position ourselves, where we can get our money, where we can get our funding from, all that kind of stuff. It was amazing. Is there something like that for financial advisors? It's not, obviously I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not really part of that community in that way, but is there a networking sort of group or community? Nothing like that. No.
And that is something that I think we could really do with, and especially in these remote world, in this remote world, we get invited to webinars on a regular basis, and we're swamped by forum invitations and so on and so forth. The reality is there's nothing there that kind of brings like-minded individuals in the industry together. And I think sometimes that, certainly if you are a one-man band and you're, operating from home and, you're maybe, even if you've got a couple of staff, it can be, don't get me wrong, I've been in the industry now for a long time, but it can be quite an isolating experience if you're just new to it and you're not maybe within either a network or you're not within a firm that has other advisors. I think the reality is that you really, at the early stage of your career, you need to be within an environment where you can bounce off other people. So I think joining a network or a firm that has other advisors and getting them to mentor you, for me, that's everything. That's really where you need to be, because you'll cut your teeth there in a safe environment. You've got the potential of new leads coming in from them, probably. They'll let you have some of their clients. If you make a mistake, it doesn't matter because they're there to kind of help you and assist you through. And you will make mistakes. It's a given. We all do.
Yeah.
But I think that's really important because let's be honest, the qualifications, they're only 5% of what we do. The qualifications are literally a gateway into the industry. The rest of the time that you spend in the industry is building on your experience. And every time you speak to a client, every time you have interaction with a fund manager or another IFA, that's experience that's logged and it helps you to develop and improve your business.
It's funny, isn't it? Like the financial planning industry can be quite sort of not insular. What's the word? Can be quite protective. Advisors can be quite protective. I found a couple of advisors that do build their smaller communities and
Sure.
sort of build trusting relationships with other advisors. But as an industry, there isn't this kind of open kind of look. Because at the end of the day, there's not that many financial advisors and there's a shitload of clients out there not getting financial advice. You'd think there'd be like this open forum, communities, sharing ideas and passing ideas and helping it grow. And actually, interestingly, that's what I'm sort of looking at with the Financial Planner Life is to create this community and have a training platform as well with videos and all that kind of stuff where you can bring
I think
people
we really
together.
need it. I really do. I think the CII PFS, they've tried over the years to do things like that, but nothing along the lines of what you're talking about. I think where they come into their own is maybe coming up with new initiatives like the Forces Plan, where they're offering advice to ex-forces personnel. They liaise with the Treasury Department and with government policy and so on. The reality is that actually, I think from a training and mental health side and just a social aspect, I think that if we can do something like you're referring to, I think it would bring a greater sense of solidarity to the industry. And I think that is so important for the youngsters coming in, for the new people. They need to feel part of something.
And also it allows, so you mentioned there like the PFS and all of that. There's so many things out there, but it's just everywhere. It's not consolidated into one place. So what you've got to do is just bring all that news in, bring all those changes, all the advice, all the trainers and all that kind of stuff. Perhaps somebody, because one thing I've noticed is financial planners they're not massively embracing personal branding, and getting on camera and video and photos and using social media in the way that it can be used to win and acquire new clients. Yeah. And, if you fed into something like that and there was somebody in there and it's like, oh, look, here's our personal branding course, sign up for it. It's just easy, isn't it?
I think you're on the right track. And I think that within the industry, there is a huge amount of knowledge that's almost secret in the nicest possible way. Because unless you're a financial advisor, you really wouldn't have a clue what goes on and how to get where I am, for example. Yeah. And it's only really through experience that I've got where I am. I didn't kind of read it in the book or, I didn't kind of look at other advisors and say, yeah, I can see how they got there. To a degree, it's just through trying things and getting where I am that's got me here. And so it's certainly not as structured as maybe some of the other routes like, accountancy, legal practices and so on. And I think financial advice is still, to a degree, it's not really, I know people say it's a profession now, but the reality is that, parents, when they're talking to their kids about what they want to do in the future, the perception is still there that, that they're going to go off and become an architect, accountant, or doctor
or something,
or lawyer. It's not so much a financial advisor. I think that's probably a generational thing. I think the old school probably still think of I think there is still an element of people out there who see financial advisors as the man from the Pearl, the man from the co-op, or the banker who was trying to force you into an ISA when the market was through the roof, that kind of thing. And there's a bit of suspicion.
Yeah, I think financial planning, there's a couple of financial planners that I'm coming across that are bringing it very much into the now, this kind of social, this kind of social effect where they are positioning themselves as financial coaches. It was lifestyle financial planning, wasn't it, for ages?
Sure.
But,
And
now it's coaching. I'm your financial coach. And I think we're putting out content. They're sharing stuff for free all the time, and they're getting on podcasts. And there's one guy I've got on the podcast called Emmanuel Asukwo, who's on Spend Less, Save Better. I think it's Channel 4. Okay. I always batter on about him because he's really invested heavily in social media and investing in that model of being a coach.
Sure.
Building that relationship and being a coach, because his whole approach is like, well, I'm telling the kids. I'm telling the wealthy ones of tomorrow, because the generational sort of the transition of wealth to the next generation is going to be huge, isn't it? And what he's saying is I'm building that relationship with those guys. So before any other financial advisor goes out there and tries to win it through, that way, he's like, I'm already in their newsfeed. I'm already talking to them on Instagram. I'm already giving them hints and tips. And he's playing that kind of long game. And and
that's organic growth, but a really canny way of doing it. So that's great. From my point of view, I kind of wanted to grow quicker. So in 10 years, I've kind of gone from a start to where I am now. And so I couldn't have achieved that through organic growth. I don't think, certainly, yes, you're right. You can go down the social media route. You can do all the kind of the videos, the streaming, and all the other things. Have I got the time?
Slogging it out, and that's slogging it out.
You've got to be committed to it. You've got to have other income sources early on because you're just not earning enough. for me personally, I'd already got 17 years experience in the bank. I didn't want to spend another 17 years waiting to become successful. So for me, it was a case of stepping off as an already qualified and experienced financial advisor, going independent in 2011, and saying, right, I know my model, I know my goal, I know where I want to be in 5 years' time. In fact, I know where I want to be in 12 months' time, and actually building on that and continuously looking forward. So I've done that through.
Let's give somebody a bit of a. Let's give the listeners a bit of a reality check then. Okay, you worked for the bank for quite some time. Obviously, you're employed. It's tied. You know, you may have built some strong relationships within those banks. You know, some of those may have followed you when you went independent.
Not many, because of data protection. I didn't want to push the boat out. Okay. So 1 or 2 of them contacted me, probably anywhere between 5 and 10. But the reality is that, you know, they were in the minority because I didn't actively go out looking for clients. Okay, so you've gone independent, right? You've gone self-employed. Yeah. You had that horrible situation where Honister goes under. Yes. And you lose a load of money. Did you ever get that money back or not? No.
That was it gone?
They're still with the administrators. They're still sending letters saying that we might get, you know, a penny in the pound. So, you know, the reality is we probably won't ever get anything back. And it's times like that as well where, and this kind of sums up being a business owner, and back to what you said earlier about sometimes it's quite a lonely place being on your own and then not being able to turn to somebody and think, shit, you know, has this ever happened to you? What the hell do I do? Absolutely. I bet like, so what was your sort of mental health and stress levels like during that period? Was it? Yeah, the funny thing was, I was far more stressed leaving the bank in the latter stages of working in the bank than I was when I was in that position you're talking about. Right. So if we take a year before Honister went bust, a year before that, I was in the bank. I had sales targets through the roof that I really didn't agree with. I was trying to sell products to clients who clearly didn't need them or want them. We were coming through the latter stages of the financial crisis, and there was a massive mistrust from clients to the banking industry. Lloyd's had just saved the Halifax, so they just avoided them going bust. But massive mistrust. And so I left at a time when, you know, I clearly was not happy about going out and selling to clients who just wanted reassurance, and they wanted to just effectively, what the bank should have done is invested in us as, you know, as restorers of relationships during that period, and just sat back and said, scrub sales targets, we just want to keep those clients. And I think then the banks would have got through RDR and still kept a sales force. The reality is they got through the financial crisis, saw massive losses, had RDR drop on them as well, and then all the banks in the UK got rid of all the financial advisors, apart from a few high net worth advisors. So we suddenly went from, if you look at the stats, I think 10 to 15 years ago, we had somewhere around 250,000 advisors in the industry. Today, there's sub 23,000, roughly. And that's massive. You know, that's a massive change. So we're a tiny industry now. But in answer to your question, when I left the bank, oh God, it was horrendous, you know, because I felt as though I couldn't move left or right. You know, I was employed, I was under the control of somebody else. They were trying to make me do things that I didn't believe were ethical. And so, but I had a mortgage to pay. So you're in this awful quandary. Whereas when I was self-employed, there was no money coming in, but I had my qualifications. And I believed that I would make it because there was no other alternative. And I had clients who believed in me as well. And so I had another advisor who very helpfully gave me some short-term contract work to do, which helped me financially during that following 6-month period. And then I also bought leads off the internet. It was pretty grim, but I managed to survive. And then
let's be clear about that then. So if someone leaves, like, let's say someone thinks they're going to go self-employed as a financial advisor. It happens all the time. Sure. I speak to them all the time. Yep. Let's be real here. What does the first year, 2 years, 3 years, what does it really look like? And what should they really expect?
It genuinely depends on two things: what you're leaving and what you're joining. So if you are leaving a position where you've already got some clients, the reality is that it's not too bad because you've already got however many £1,000s a month coming in from those clients wherever you are. And when you go self-employed, you're then bringing that income stream across by doing the transfer of servicing and so on. There is a data protection thing.
If you're allowed to do that.
Whether you're allowed to do that, whether the clients will follow you, whether they're more affiliated to the brand. There's loads of questions there. And then the other thing, of course, you've got to bear in mind is that where are you going to? So does the new place have leads to provide you? They have a client bank that they're prepared to give you that's maybe just got some legacy commissions coming in to give you enough to pay the mortgage. And does it have the potential of new business? You know, where are you going to get new leads from? So there's two sides to that coin, and it really is dependent on where you're coming from and also where you're going to.
I think as well with setting up your own business and running your own business, you have to go through quite a few pain barriers anyway. No 2 days can be the same. You're always sort of like that, you know, like it's you kind of protection, your blanket. It's always a bit of a false protection blanket, really, because you never know when you're going to get made redundant when you're working for a bank or whatever. Yeah. But you're on the kind of master of your own destiny. And when you're running your own business, it's kind of nice, but sometimes you can't, sometimes you're so lost in perhaps a bit of fear or worry or concerns and all of that. And I don't know about you, but I experienced some quite bad depression and stress and anxiety.
Yeah, I've been through all that, Sam.
Drinking and silly things just to kind of calm me down.
Yeah, the funny thing is, I never went through that since I've had my own business.
Have you not? Okay.
I went through that when I was employed. So I went through all that when I was with the banks. And that was probably the hardest period for me, because you're not in control of your own destiny. When you're self-employed and you have a qualification, you know that it doesn't matter how bad it gets, you've got a skill. Yeah. So you've got that skill and you will always make money somehow. You'll get through it. The one thing I would say is that when you step off, you need to make sure you've got a little bit of a buffer behind you financially. Yeah. Because you don't want to step off and go self-employed and then suddenly find that because of a lack of resources, you're then having to leave the industry. The potential is there for the industry, but it may be that you have to invest in the first year in yourself, really, to be able to build that reputation, get those clients across, get some organic growth. And so just have some money behind you for that first year. Yeah. But coming back to what you were saying in terms of downsides, the biggest downside I have now is not so much stress, it's not so much depression, it's tiredness. So it's stress, physical stress through tiredness, because we are so busy as an industry that if you're good at your job, which, you know, most financial advisors will say that they are busy, and they are victims of their own success. You'll get the odd referral, you may be buying clients, you're busy. And, you know, in my world, I'm directly authorised, so I'm not with the network. I've got my own Gabriel reports to do. I've got all the other stuff coming up that kicks you, FCA fees, PI insurance renewals. So it's not just dealing with the clients. And sometimes I have to be honest, there's not enough hours in the day. You know, I haven't had a holiday for a long time, and I'm getting to a point where I'm getting back into a routine and getting some normality. My plan was that after a certain amount of years, I'd be in a model, and I'm pretty much there. You know, the 6 months I'll be there, where I can travel and I can do my job from where I am. And I can also, I can work the hours I want to work when I want to work, and I've kind of got the life work balance that you would want at this stage in your life.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? I think you've got to expect to go through a few pain barriers, a few difficulties when you run your own business, but you've got to keep persevering, because once you will eventually get through it. And if I look at myself now, where I am to where I was 10 years ago, I have to remind myself that, Sam, you're like pretty much doing what you want to do. Like, you know, you've just gone and set up Financial Planner Life podcast when you've got 13, 14 other people in there working on your business that you set up a little while back. I forget that. And I think you have to kind of remind yourself when you're a business owner to give yourself a bit of a break as well. And as you mentioned about being tired, I think, physically and mentally tired. Absolutely. And I think sometimes you've got to come into the present and go, actually, perhaps I do need a break, or I need to do some meditation, or I need to exercise, or I need to make time for things that are going to do. I spend some time with my family, because if I come home and I had my wife working for me for a year, that was mental. Like that's like some of the things I've done, and I just think purely selfish. That was purely selfish.
Absolutely.
And it's
slave
stressful.
labor.
What do you do so you run your own business, you get tired, it's hard work.
Yeah.
What do you do yourself to sort of give yourself a bit of downtime and to refuel the batteries?
So I live in the country. So for me, it's about getting out for a jog. I'll go, and I'm not a big runner because my knees are knackered, but I'll go out for a 6 or 7 mile or a 9 mile jog. Take me a couple of hours, hour and a half. Yeah. And I'll just kind of go off road and off into the woods and roundabout, never meet anyone. And that kind of clears my head and gives me thinking time, thinking space, creative space. Gives me time to kind of do my own thing and kind of almost assimilate all the jigsaw pieces together. And I also think about the future quite a bit as well. So I kind of think about, sustaining the business. That's a big thing for me. It's sustainability, security, financial security. When I take holidays, it's nice to think that, I'm away, but we've got the contingencies in place. Something goes wrong, it's not going to mean me flying back to the UK. I've got staff there who know what they're doing. I've got another member of staff. So I've tried to always build in contingencies for the business. And so, we've gone through COVID. It hasn't really affected us, really. I'm tireder, but the reality is that, we've got through. And so it's about looking forward and trying to spot things that could knock you off your feet so that they don't then appear. And then, because if you don't give some thought to the future, that's when things will occur, and then you start to get depressed. Yeah. Because you start to beat yourself up thinking, God, I should have thought of that. And actually, I'm getting physically tired now, and also I'm not where I wanted to be. And the other thing is, you've got to have, because I think in terms of the next 12 months, but also where I want to be at the end goal, kind of 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead, and that kind of thing. And that can always change. So I think you've got to be flexible. You've got to not be too hard on yourself. Yeah. Roll with the punches. If life craps on you next week, pick yourself up, roll with it, smile, go for a drink, and then get through it. Talk to your friends.
And it's all learning as well. It's all learning experience. Like some of the shit that I've been through, I just think to myself, well, I'm kind of glad I went through that because, it's made me stronger and made me a better person than I am today. Funny you said about running. I love my running. I do quite an extensive amount of running, and it's something I've really gotten into. And when you were doing that, the jigsaw thing. So when I run, it's like I can bring a thought into my head, and because it's like you're in hyperzone, and you can just kind of look at that and go, and it goes, and the next one comes like, that's it. It's such a beautiful, it's like almost meditative. It's like a beautiful way to clear your head, and you come back and you're like, oh my God, like I've got loads serotonin running through my body. I feel great, and I've got nothing on my mind.
That's it.
It's beautiful. It's really good. I highly recommend running to anybody, especially if you run a business and you've got lots on your mind. Get out and run, because it just does your stress levels the world of good. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, because of my knee, mine's kind of a jog and a walk. But I get out and I do that, and I do my mountain biking as well, bit of swimming, that kind of thing.
In the countryside, in the woods, in the countryside. I love running through the woods, like getting the energy from the tree. I love it. I'm a bit of a hippie at heart, really. I absolutely love that stuff. And I just
do. I think you get a lot of energy from outside, and all this screen-based stuff it can be draining. So I think if you can kind of offset that with getting outside, getting away from all the electricity and all the kind of the screens and all that, it's great. And the other thing, of course, is I was going to say the other thing as well is making sure that you and your staff get out and do stuff together. And I know it's difficult with COVID, but I'm a great believer in teamwork and getting to know each other as people, not just business colleagues. Yeah. Because that's where you get to know about the little idiosyncrasies, and you get, because we've all got good things and bad things about us. I'm great with people, but I'm quite nerdy in the admin. So if I had to do all my own admin, I'd never get anything else done. No. Whereas I know that I can give it to my ladies, and they will go through, they're like machines. They'll go through the admin. They don't get emotionally stressed by it. And they can churn it out, which is fantastic. It's really hyper accurate. Yeah. So I get the accuracy and the volume, but then I make sure that I touch base with them at touch points along the process to make sure it's up to the quality and they get the learning exercises that we want. So it's
interesting you were saying about the future-proofing your business, and the fact that you aren't somebody that's gone, I'm going to hire 5 advisors and make loads of money. What you've actually said is, I'm going to focus on growing the business a strategic way, which is through acquisitions. The best way for me to get clients is that way. I understand that. You've gone through the process, done it. And in the background, what you're doing is building support. And it's the support function that allows you to go off and do what you do. So you are looking at it from a less risky perspective. You're thinking, I'm going to building the solid foundations to secure what it is I'm doing. And even then you're thinking, possibly I might bring somebody in, but only if. And I like that, you know,
because you've
not
got to bear in mind as well. Yeah, absolutely that. The one thing you've got to bear in mind is it's all about margins in my business or in any business. Turnover is key. You've got to have money coming in to be able to, you know, front end activity in any business is crucial. But then once you've done that and you've got an increasing turnover, I think a lot of advisors then fall into what I call the turnover trap. So all they've got their eye on is this increasing turnover. So they take on more and more staff, more and more advisors to kind of almost satisfy their desire for a higher top number. Whereas in my business, although my top number is increased every year, the reality is that for me, it's about getting your actual net profit up. That is the key, because then it brings benefits to you personally, so that you can, it's all relevant in great business, but you also, as a personal, you know, you want to see the personal benefits for you and your family, but also it means you're building personal financial security for your family and so on. But the other thing I think is really important is that if you can build up a network of support, what you're also doing then is you're making sure that your own longevity in the industry is greater. Because the problem is in my industry is that the more successful you get, the stronger chance you have of burnout. And I think if you do the job really well and you're DA and you're independent, there's a lot of crap coming at us. The regulatory demands are getting bigger, the FCA fees are growing, and there's a big, I think there's a big mental health problem in our industry that's waiting to happen. Because the you know, the guys like us who are stringent, we're not going to go direct, we're not going to go restricted, we want to stay independent, we're drowning under the workload. And so I think what I've recognized kind of right at the beginning of this process was I need staff to take some of that heavy lifting. And also going forward, that means that in a few years' time, I can start to take a step back from relentless appointments and actually still have a core of 100, maybe 80 households, but they're all big clients because I've gone through this condensing process on a number of occasions. And actually then I've got more time. So instead of me doing 50 hours a week, I'm doing 25 hours a week, but they're quality hours. And that means I've probably got a greater appetite to work until I'm 60, 65. Because I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Have a better quality of life and a more balance.
Absolutely that.
Philip, thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to bring it to an end now. I could talk to you all day.
Not at all. It's all right. I'm sure we're both knackered.
Yeah, more Zoom fatigue. I've learned a lot, and thank you so much for sharing also around the acquisition side. I think that's an area, like I said, I haven't spoken to anybody about before, but it's always on the back of the minds of people who are financial planners about how they grow their businesses, especially the self-employed. So thanks for sharing your experience around that. And I think that's an area that I'll share on social media as well, because I think that'll interest people.
It's been really valuable. Thank you, Sam. And I hope this goes some way to kind of give some people a bit of a roadmap in terms of, you know, if they're new to the industry, it might just give them a bit of inspiration.
100%. Philip, thank you so much for your time today, mate.
All the best. Thanks, Sam. Take care.
Cheers.